All right. So, welcome to episode 2 of Scriptures Are Like Statistics. You can make them say whatever you want. And today, Nick and I are talking about actually tithing because this is a very big topic that has so many different things about it. And tithing is to give 10% of all of your increase to the Lord, the God, to your wherever you get your spiritual guidance. In the Old Testament, it's the priests who did not get a measure of land, but were given a tenth of everything that everybody else had. And then, believe it or not, the priests had to add another tithe. They had to take the tithe of the tithe, and they had to also tithe of that. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So when we think about our income and we pay taxes, it's kind of like that, except when we tithe, it's more of a voluntary kind of thing. In theory, we're supposed to do that. So I wanted to start this conversation because tithing is, if you belong to a religious institution, tithing is often part of that contract that you sign with a religious organization. So my question, Nick, to start off is, when you belong to a church, did you have this contract with them that you were a member, and then did you tithe?
Don't think it was ever an actual contract. I think it was more of an unwritten sort of law. And that peer pressure when the plate came around through the pews and people next to you put money in, and there was that level of shame that would hit you as you passed the plate if you didn't put money in. Um, and I think at different levels, uh, there's certainly has been an idea that I have picked up on since a small child that the more money that you give, the more godly you
Right. And conversely, and this is the thing that really stuck out for me is that it's better to give than it is to receive is also a common Christian um, dogma. But at the same time, the Bible is really clear in so many places, not just in the New Testament or the Old Testament, but in many other religious scriptures and writings, even before Christianity, even before Judaism, those religions also have tithing, some form of tithing in part of their religious or spiritual practice. So when you're balancing out passing the plate, which is sort of like a love offering, that's where you're putting 20 bucks in the plate. You're not tithing. If you make
are.
$100,000 a year, right? And I know that there are people among us who do that. And so to make 10% of that is $10,000.
Right.
So you would not be just putting that in the plate as it goes by, right?
That would be a heavy plate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you're not doing, and if everybody in the church had to do that, so that's more of a tithe, whereas this is more like an offering
Mm,
that I think that religious services depend on in some way, but it's not the same as actually getting paid a tithe. Now, I
right.
know in synagogues, some synagogues, at least some of the ones that I was associated with in California, they actually make you submit your tax returns so that they can make sure they're calculating your tithe correctly. And part of that is about the law and Leviticus that you are required to make three tithes. Actually, the first one is the one that you just make because that's what God tells you to do. The second one is a love offering, which you can do because you're doing honoring someone or you're honoring an event, like you have a child that's born, so you make a love offering, which is on top of your regular tenth. And then the final one is a offering or charity tithe that you can then put to a specific thing. So in these days and times, that might be supporting, relief efforts in Israel during the conflict. So, but that doesn't have anything to do with your original tithe, which is what actually supports your religious institution. So knowing that it's the law, it just makes sense that of course you're going to show this is how much I make and this is how much my tithe is. So you can expect this because running a synagogue or or any spiritual institution is a business as well. It's not just about the mission, it's about the business. So again, going back to this idea of it's better to give than to receive versus the idea that what you give is what you get, which is the golden rule. So what how do you separate those or how do you bring those concepts together?
I think that there's a difference between giving to get, right? If you're giving because you think it's going to get you something, I would posit that often people give to the tithing plate in front of everyone or the offering plate in front of everyone to get something in return. They're getting recognition, they're getting approval, they're getting maybe a heightened status, and ultimately, I think for most of them, maybe I shouldn't say most of them, often some people give because they think, like we've talked about, they're buying their way into a better level of heaven, so to speak. Because if they can give more, they feel that that makes them more valuable to whatever entity. For me, I think that the best kind of giving is when you give freely because you just want to give, which means you don't hold on to what happens to the money. Where does it go? How does the person that you're handing it to use it? What are they using it for? Is it something you would deem appropriate? Um, and I know you and I have discussed this before about homeless people and handing them money versus other people who refuse to do that because they don't know how it will be used or they won't approve of what it might be used for. So I think there's those things. And then the other thing I was going to say was that you had mentioned there was a part about brain is when you're receiving from someone, perhaps at Christmas or Hanukkah, when you're receiving something that's expected to be given, there's a different kind of pressure there. There's a different kind of, it's just a different feeling. If you're giving because you love to share and you're excited to give someone something that you know that they want, that can be very different than in some families feeling like you have to provide a gift because it's expected that you have to provide a gift for everyone in your family, which could be stressful monetarily. That if your gift isn't good enough, people will, maybe talk about it for the next year about how they gave the crappy gift, or, so there's a lot of other stuff that comes in than just receiving. When you receive a gift that is something you actually really like and we're excited about and interested in, and it shows someone put thought into figuring out what you might want, that's a great feeling. And I think that's still just you getting something. When you're giving something away, you get that feeling for everyone you've given it to. So to me, that's a bigger win than receiving, because you get one thing, so to speak, right? You're excited for yourself, but when you're giving something to other people, you're excited for each of them.
Right. Well, and when you put it like that, of course, with the spin of the holidays, which are imminent because right now it's the week of Thanksgiving when we're recording this. This is goes back to unconditional love, right? You love someone regardless of whatever. You give a gift regardless. So, but tithing is not a gift; it's a law. And so, again, if it is, this is where to me, it's that feeling that gets all like it's murky. It's tinged with guilt and shame, because if it's better to give than to receive, and you should receive nothing for whatever you give, because then you're trying to control or manipulate or, create some power struggle within whatever it is that you're giving, then that complex set of emotions gets attached to you actually sharing even money, because money is nothing compared to love, right? Or your self expression, which is even greater than that. Because if you're not you, nobody can be you. So that's like the ultimate thing. So, in terms of giving a gift, what makes it a gift if you're not really giving it freely? Then it's not really a gift, right? Then
Well, and
it's,
like you said, sorry, no,
go
it's
ahead.
just you had said that tithing is law, but it's not a gift. It's actually a payment, right? It's a
Correct.
payment in kind. You gave me all these abundances for the year. You gave me this many bushels of apples, and so now, you gave me 10. I'm giving one back to you, but it's not doesn't actually go in the parts that I was reading. Part of what it was talking about was that there were actually quite a few caveats. If you brought it through your roof instead of through your gate, and you didn't have to pay the tithe on that. It seemed like there was a lot of conversation around how do we avoid tithing for everything, right? To me, it really reminded me of tax laws and loopholes. Like, how do I get out of giving you the full 10%? And then there was also, like you said, there was part, so you give the 10%, but then there was also like a 50th that you're supposed to give to the priest. And then there was a 60th that you were supposed to give to someone like, so there were all these little tiny pieces of things that you're supposed to give away. Um, who you're supposed to give it to, when you're supposed to give it to, a lot of conversation around, well, are we counting this based on when we harvested it, was it just what we harvested, or was it, maybe if we harvested it more later, that was late or an early crop, do we count that? There was a lot really involved in that process. Like I felt like that's where accountants came from, trying to figure out how do we decide how many, bushels of apples are considered a tenth, right? What's the total? And with produce, it's constantly changing, right? Like there are
Right.
different seasons. So if you're giving your tithe in vegetables and you grew zucchini and they came to fruition and harvest at a different time than your avocado tree, it's not like it's all sitting in a storeroom rotting, waiting for its, tax day, right? Like it's not, it's tithing day, right? And so that was really interesting too, the complexities of how do you do that in practice?
Right.
How
So
does
in
that
the
happen
Talmud,
in real life?
right. And the Talmud is great because the Talmud goes through every little piece of Leviticus and then, ad nauseum. There's an entire volume about tithing in the Talmud. And then there's also the Midrash and the Mishnah. And there's many, many different, and then there's the Quran. And, this is another one of those things where all of these Judaic, Abrahamic religions kind of blend together. So that's Islam, Judaism, and Christianity all come from the same father, which is Abraham or Abram. And so Abram was the first person required to tithe. And there wasn't tithing before that because there was no monotheism prior to that, which is why there are so many admonitions about, don't have demons, don't have false gods, don't have idols, all of those things, because in all the religions before, technically, that was a very common practice. And so, and you can find it throughout the Bible, front to back, old to new, about how people have used idols or false gods and what that really means, how it all fits together. But in terms of giving, yes, when we're talking about things like produce, or we're talking about the number of cattle that you have, or the calves that you have, or the pigeons that you have, we don't see it that way. We translated all of that into money, which is a singular unit of exchange. So now we tithe on our income, and we don't often tithe on the other things that we get that we don't really think about as terms of, increase that I would need to tithe on. So, and some I think would argue that anytime you get a discount, that's sort of like, is that something that you should tithe on, or is that something that you have just been given? Because the law of tithing is you give a tenth and it's given back to you a hundredfold. So then you have to tithe on the hundredfold, and then you tithe on the hundredfold of that, and then you tithe on the hundredfold of that. So if you get a discount, is that you got money? No, it's that you got that you had to pay less. So again, how do we translate all of that into the law, which says you will give a tenth? If you want to be prosperous, the law of prosperity is you give a tenth and you get a hundredfold. This is the same principle as life insurance. You pay a premium and then we pay you big bucks. It's exactly the same thing. I think it's really funny when people say to me, I don't believe in life insurance. I'm like, I don't know why. It's a concrete thing. You can get a policy, you can hang it on your wall if you like, if you want to look at it every day, but it's a contract. And that is what tithing is. But again, it's very complex. People feel like they shouldn't have to give, they shouldn't be forced to give, right? That the law shouldn't apply to them because we're not Jews, we're not in the wilderness, we're not Abraham, we're modern people, and we just don't do that anymore. But giving and receiving are connected, right? And we think about that in terms of our actions, what we say, and how we behave comes back to us. So if we're rude to somebody, 9 times out of 10, within 24 hours, somebody will be rude right back to us. And that's the same law of giving and receiving. Golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto you. The Jews had turned this, or had it before, that don't do anything to anybody that you wouldn't want done to you. And to me, that's a lot more about pain and suffering than it is about doing good things. Like, that's a whole different giving, receiving. And giving comes
Right.
before receiving. right? You have to give in order to get. And that's where that guilt comes in, right? It breaks the law in half, right? If you it's better to give than it is to receive. That means it's only good if you give, but then you should live in poverty, which then breaks the law. But if you believe it, that's what you get.
That's no, but that's not what was interesting to me is there were a couple of references where it also talked about how you shouldn't tithe more. Like if you're only tithing a tenth of what you have, then the reason that that number was created, from what I was reading, was that it actually is a way or a method of keeping you and your family from giving too much. Because if you give too much, then you become the person in need, and now you are in the effect of needing to be receiving rather than being capable of giving. So that was really interesting too, because it is not, the tithing is not, it's pretty clear in the things that I was reading on the app that it's not, if you create a situation where you are giving more than you have received, then you cannot continue to sustain that. And therefore you become someone who is in need, which is not the point, right? That the point is that you're celebrating what you've already been given
Right.
in order to get more, right? Because nature abhors a vacuum. So the more you get out, more comes in. But you can't be giving out too much, because if you give away too much, you're not going to be able to sustain yourself and your family. And then you're going to create more need rather than more abundance.
Well, and here's another spin on that. And that is if you give more than 10%, then you can lift yourself above your neighbor, like you were talking about in the plate going by. So, oh, look at how much I'm giving, right? And there's a whole bunch of emotional crap attached to that as well. But again, there's that, if everybody has the same rule, then you give according to what you have, right? It's not a flat tax, but it's more like you give 10%. You don't give more than that because then you may be putting on airs, is what we would might call it, and say, I am better than you because I can give more because I'm better, because I have more, because God blessed me more. And that's, again, there's that manipulation, or it's a false God, right? Of idolizing yourself almost, that you're better than the average person because you can give, because you, not because you can give, but because you do give more than 10%.
Right.
That gets really very complicated and ugly in my mind because I can just see the murk flowing in there emotionally. How do you give and do it in a clean way? Like, that when you go to the store and you buy a gallon of milk, you pay what is on the shelf. That's what you pay. You don't feel guilty about that. You don't feel bad about that. You don't think about the farmer up in the middle of the night milking his cows, trying to make his life go. Uh, so sorry about that little interruption there. So the complicated emotional part of giving and feeling guilty, receiving and feeling guilty, right? Because we're not supposed to ask either. So the other piece of this, when we, get past all the laws of all of that, then we start to be receiving. And the other piece for me was, is it okay to have needs? Is it okay for you to need something? And oftentimes we hear, no, you shouldn't need anything. You shouldn't ask for help. You should do it on your own. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. All of that kind of stuff then gets dumped into the same little teeny pot of guilt, shame, fear, and feeling less than. So Nick, if you are like, I don't need anything, I've got everything I need because God provides everything. The universe provides everything for me. We're all connected, it's all energetic. Everything I need, I can manifest. And then I'm like, well, uh, but I don't have enough. Then I feel less than you, and you might feel superior to me because you have everything you need, and I'm just clearly, wrong. And this comes up a lot for me when I'm fishing. And I know you were waiting for the fishing example. So if you're standing on the bank and there's three of you, you have two people on either side of you, and they are catching fish left and right, and you are not catching a dang thing. How do you then reconcile that? And to me, it's just another metaphor of if everyone around you is prospering, and you're not. How is it that you can stand there and not feel like it's your fault?
There's so much to unpack in that.
Right?
It's you and I have a different experience when we fish because I don't go to catch fish,
Right.
right? And so I think there's something to that. What you're expecting and what you're looking for and the way that you interpret the signs that you see really does create your reality. And as you're sitting there perceiving other people being more successful than you, and you having more need for catching a fish than they do because they just caught one. So now clearly it should be your turn, right? And if you're not able to catch the fish, I know because we talked about this, that makes you feel like you're not as smart as the fish. The fish is outsmarting you. Um, all of that really just focuses back on, and we talked about this too, your belief that you create the world around you. And so if there's something happening that you dislike, it's your own fault and you've created that. What I think is interesting is if you weren't constantly assessing and judging yourself and the situation, would you perhaps enjoy the experience of fishing more?
Well, and I
Not
think
to
that's
mention, not to mention the many, many times when you go and you are the one catching all of the fish and other people are not.
correct. So, and it to that point, it's like, what meaning are you assigning to this particular situation, happenstance, event, whatever? So, if I go fishing and I don't have expectations that I'm going to catch fish, but I'm there to also kayak or take pictures or look around, and I don't care about whether or not I catch fish, that's a different thing than if I go to the pond, which is 2 blocks from my house, and I always catch fish there, and I have a day where I don't catch a thing. Then I'm like, is this a sign from God? But again, this is one of those things like where do we get these signs from God? And can we misinterpret them? And so what do I need to give in order to get, right? How do I make myself good enough, right, to receive the gift of catching a fish? And all of this, I know it seems like they're totally different things, but to me, this is all, it comes down to the same nut, which is how do I end up being worthy of or deserving of success or wealth or abundance? And this is where I think the Jewish traditions really help because they say, if you do these things, the answer is you get this. And so there was another book I was reading this morning, and it says, God says, pay the price, take what you will. And that's a really different perception of the law and tithing. Pay the price, take what you will. What's your first?
I don't like that. That's
You
my
don't like that?
first. I don't like that. I feel like that's really different from manifesting and having the law of attraction. If you're focused on all that you have, you're going to continue to attract more lack, more
Correct.
situations to support that you are lacking in one way or five, right?
Right.
If you are focused on manifesting positive things, then you already believe you're worthy. You don't have to do anything to become worthy except put the unworthiness out of your mind.
So
So having
isn't
a
that
list of things you have to do in order to get whatever is to me contrary to the way that the law of attraction works.
see, to me, it's pay the price, take what you want. If you focus on, if you pay your attention, right? Pay your attention to lack, take what you want. You're getting lack. Pay your attention to success or abundance, take what you like, abundance and success. So to me, it's like that that sums it up in a nutshell. Whatever you pay is what you will get. So whatever you give is what you receive.
So
And
whatever you're
that one
feeding.
sentence was like crystal.
See, when I hear pay, I don't think of it as being related to attention or energy. I think of it as a consequence, as a negative, as like a punishment. I'm going to make you pay is not a positive statement, right? It doesn't mean, oh, I'm gonna give you this opportunity to focus your attention on positive things. So when you said pay the price, take what you want, to me that's a negative. That statement sounds very negative connotatively to me. So to me, that's like after you have paid the price that I decide, then you can have what's available to you from that price. Which I guess maybe this is a has a whole other level of indications, right? But to me, it's the way that you're saying it. Yes, whatever you feed, wherever you put your attention, your time, your energy, your thoughts into, is going to then be what you choose, what you have to choose from. Then that's what's available, right?
Right.
But what I think is interesting is like people don't pay when they have to physically pay for something. They don't pay. You don't pay for a bushel of. Well, I don't know what it is with me and apples, but a bushel of apples, you don't pay for the bushel of apples and then not eat all of them.
Unless they go bad.
Right, but then you're pissed because you paid for stuff. And I mean, I don't know how many other people who might listen to this ever buy vegetables that go bad in the refrigerator or on your counter, right? Or take home leftovers or make leftovers and then never eat them.
Right.
And, speaking for myself, the very few times that's ever happened, it pisses me off because it's a
Right.
waste.
Exactly.
So if I'm
Exactly.
paying for something, then when I'm going to take what I will, it will be all of it. Because that's at least modernly, that's our mindset, right? I paid for this entire bushel of apples and I will sit here and make myself sick eating them all because I paid for it.
Right. Well, that's a whole different thing
After I
in
give
my
my
mind.
10, after I give my 10% to someone else, right?
Right. To wherever you receive spiritual learning. Okay.
Right.
So if we take the word God out, because I know sometimes God trips me up really badly, and just like everybody, right? Anybody who's had any experience with whichever God it is that they were raised with. If you take that out and you say the law says, pay your price, take what you want. There's a thing in Think and Grow Rich where it says life will give you whatever you ask. Make sure you ask for enough. There's another parable in the New Testament where Jesus is talking to some workmen and they're complaining. And they say, we came to work at first thing in the morning and the vineyard owner offered us a penny a day. In those days, whatever it is, however much it is. And we agreed to work for the whole day for that amount of money. And then all day long, the vineyard owner continued to hire new people, but he hired them at the same rate as us. And so at the last hour of the day, new workmen were hired at the same rate, but they only had to work an hour. And Jesus says, well, what's your problem? You agreed to do this. You paid the price. This is what you asked for, and this is what you got. You could have waited until 4 o'clock and then come and said, do you have any work for me? And not known that other people had been paid exactly the same to do far more work. So again, it's what are you asking for? So, do you pay the price? How do you pay the price? And again, to me, it's about energy. Dollars are inconsequential because money is everywhere around us. We print it every day. Money is irrelevant. But what you have is your energy. You have your thoughts. You have who you are as a person, your desires, your wants, your needs, things like that. So again, whatever you ask of life, life will pay it. So if life says, pay the price, take what you want. How do you pay the price? You pay attention. And I think it's interesting that we say pay attention, pay the price, pay for it. You're gonna pay for it, meaning it's a consequence. But that consequence is also that's the same thing, right? You can have a negative or a positive consequence. We think of consequences as being negative, but they can also be positive. As a consequence of my saving money when I was 18, now that I'm 65, I will have money that I can live on. That's a consequence for a decision I made when I was 18. As a consequence of taking home my leftovers that I didn't eat, I became angry because I wasted something that I paid for. But I chose to not take the full value of what I have paid for. So when we pay the price, we then take what we want, and we know what price we're paying. You knew that when you bought dinner, you were going to pay $12, and you knew that you weren't going to finish it because you can look at your plate and go, "These are portions for 4 people. I know that I'm not going to eat all this. I'm going to take this home." And then you put it in your refrigerator and you say to yourself, "God, I hope I eat that." And then every time you open the refrigerator, you're like, "God, I should eat that. I paid $12 for that." Right? But then another day goes by, and then you open it and it's full of mold. You're like, "Damn, I should have eaten that." So, but you agreed to pay $12 and you got what you paid for. What you did with it afterwards is your problem.
Accurate.
Yes?
Very true.
Yes?
Yep.
So no matter what you pay, you get what you're paying for because you know what you're paying for, even if it's just your attention or your energy. So let's wrap this up because we've already gone for 45 minutes. So, and I know that you're now in a very loud environment. So I'm going to say this is a very interesting topic that started out with what seemed like a very small topic and ended up being a much larger thing that has to do with our emotions and our expectations. And when we talk about the law of attraction, we are talking about expectancy. You get what you expect, you get what you believe, and what you believe you expect, right? I know that when I turn the light switch on, light's going to turn on. I expect that to happen every time. And if it doesn't, then the light bulb's burned out, or my power's been turned off, or that switch in my house doesn't work, which I have switches like that. But I think my point is, you know, we have expectations, and those are based on our beliefs. And so tithing is about a belief. You can't do too much so that you could be holier than thou, and you can't do too little because then you're not paying the price for your abundance. And it's only a tenth. You get to keep 90%. And God only asks for, or the universe only asks for, a very small percent. And 10 is a magic number in every numerology system that there ever has been. 10 is a magic number. So, any last thoughts? And then we'll shut this down. And I'm sure we'll come back to it a million times.
Right. The only thing I had was you said we get what we expect, but I actually think that the idea that we get what we deserve is the root cause of why people struggle.
Right. Because that's what you believe you deserve. Uh-oh, you froze. Nick, are you there? All right. Well, that's the end of this episode, and we will be back next time.